Welcome to Thoughts on Thinking. My name's Spencer, and in this video I will be explaining why Nietzsche hated Socrates and the Dialectic. There were two main reasons why Nietzsche more or less hated Socrates. This was down to the Dialectic and with the belief that through the Dialectic, being rational thought, that it would equate to happiness and virtue. Nietzsche accused Socrates of supporting an ideal of truth and virtue that was transcendental or beyond the five senses of human nature. In this sense, he linked Socrates with Jesus Christ. This is why he equally condemned Christianity and anything to do with such idealism. A well-demonstrated illustration of Nietzsche against Socrates is shown in Plato's book Gorgias, which involves Socrates debating with the nobleman Callicles. Callicles argues that natural law is the law of the jungle, where the strong dominate and rule over the weak. That is the way human life should be. He proclaims that self-control is for slaves, and he mocks Socrates for believing in self-control and so-called temperaments and virtue. Callicles goes on to exclaim that Greek nobles should teach their youth to take what they want when they want it. Like Nietzsche, Callicles argues in his own way that there is a master morality and a slave morality, and that Socrates was teaching some form of slave morality, and that humanity would decline into a distasteful decadence if slave morality should ever get the upper hand in our existence. In terms for Nietzsche, slave morality got the upper hand when Christianity took over the Roman Empire. This is one of the reasons that Socrates was accused of corrupting the youth of Greece with this form of idealism within action and thought. Because of this, Socrates was condemned to death, and Nietzsche approved of that judgment. Nietzsche believed in the will to power, in the life of the five senses, and that happiness is solely and only the joy of the five senses, with this being through instinct, and that using the dialectic method would barrier upon such humanly reaction to the world would not equate to happiness. Nietzsche idolized the pre-Socratic Greeks, the old warrior aristocracy, the Greeks of the Iliad, Dionysus, and the tragic art forms and sculpture. He thought they embraced life truly and said yes to life. He loved their physical world. But the great Greeks fell into decline. By 400 BC, the aristocracy of Athens had lost their way and were turning to decadence, according to Nietzsche. You could say that the problem of Socrates' so-called cure was really a seed for asceticism, which can be seen as reducing oneself, your body, and rejecting the physical world. This then sprouted for the corruption of Western thought for thousands of years, spreading through into Christianity. The Socratic cure, Nietzsche believes, ended up being a great life-rejecting force, thus saying no to life and therefore no to the will to power. This is because Nietzsche saw life as equating to the will to power. In his Twilight of the Idols, Friedrich Nietzsche criticizes Socrates, calling him and Plato symptoms of degeneration, tools of the Greek dissolution, pseudo-Greek, anti-Greek. Not only did he criticize Socrates' methods, but he also wrote saying, "By birth, Socrates belonged to the lowest class. Socrates was a plebeian, we are told, and can see in sculptures of him how ugly he was. But ugliness, in itself an objection, is among the Greeks almost a refutation. Was Socrates a Greek at all?" Nietzsche argued that Socrates corrupted Greek culture with his emphasis on dialectic, or what we would call rational argument. Before Socrates, this type of discourse would have been regarded as in poor taste and not very persuasive, a tool of the lower classes or plebeians, as Socrates was within the commoner demographic. Socrates was an ugly man with no other merits and qualifications. Nietzsche viewed his attempt to introduce the dialectical method as an attempt to popularize himself into the figure of a cult, such that other Greek intellectuals will attempt to emulate and respect him by virtue of being the originator of the dialectical method. Therefore, having equated reason with happiness and virtue through the dialectic, Socrates also allowed the weaker and less sophisticated philosophical views to gain popularity. Such views usually disdained the reality of life and sought for transcendental truths. A prime example of this is the rise of Stoicism and/or Christianity. If you haven't seen my video on why Nietzsche hated Stoicism, make sure you do, as his reasons highly overlap with this video. Anyways, this caused Nietzsche to blame Socrates for introducing the dialectics to divert people's attention to the life-affirming Dionysian pre-Socratic philosophical views, and allowed for the dialectics and its offshoots in other territories to rise and develop into society. Having equated reason with happiness and virtue means that simple acts of happiness that are not bound to a form of finalized, rational, moralistic assertion are trampled as distasteful vices of wrongdoing. Nietzsche therefore viewed this as a form of alienation towards our humanly nature as a species. Nietzsche thought that Socrates was not a cause for decadence, but that the decadence of Greece was a cause for Socrates and Plato. Therefore, their only attempt for salvation from this potential disaster was to either become absurdly rational with the dialectic method or to perish altogether. As I quote from the Twilight of the Idols, "The fanaticism with which all Greek reflection throws itself upon rationality betrays a desperate situation. There was danger. There was only but one choice, either to perish or to be absurdly rational. The moralism of the Greek philosophers from Plato on is pathologically conditioned. So is their reverence for logical argument. Reason equals virtue and happiness. That means merely that one must imitate Socrates and counter the dark appetites with a permanent daylight, the daylight of reason. One must be cleverer, clear, bright at any price. Any concession to the instincts, to the unconscious, leads downward." I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment your thoughts down below, and to subscribe for more content on philosophy, psychology, and symbolism.